Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 536, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 6, a detailed account of how the spirit of error pushes your mind to the brink of disaster. The podcast objectives are restate the great danger of distrust in your mind, reveal how error weaponizes your CPU, reveal how error corrupts your impressions, and reveal how error changes the reality of your experience. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcast or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. No trust in the truth. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 505 of our exposition of lawlessness. Last week, we progressed our analysis of the impact of ignorance and deception, and we came to see how they eliminate compliance and trust from your mind. No doubt, these are both tremendous losses, notwithstanding the fallout from the losses in your battles with error and distrust are the greatest losses we have analyzed to date, which is saying a lot. If you recall, error and distrust conquer 80% of your thought dimension, which is more than all the other degrees of lawlessness combined. Here is why this is so devastating. By filling your mind with error and distrust, ignorance and deception create a mental environment where you have no trust in the truth. This is why I have referred to this interval as a point of no return. For only truth can set us free. Ergo, where there is no trust in the truth, men are enslaved by error and a false reality, which is why the majority within this nation are yet under the curse of this captivity. That said, before we continue analyzing the progression of death, I want to take a closer look at what is happening in your mind during your battles with error and distrust. This is crucial for the primary reason why men and women are constantly defeated in spiritual warfare is because they are not prepared for the next battle. Ergo, we must thoroughly analyze this battle For this is one battle you cannot afford to lose. Let's get started. The evil has just begun. Now, first things first, if you were with us during phase one, then you are familiar with the diagrams I am using to illustrate the Second Great War of your mind. That said, if you were not with us during phase one and you have any questions about any of the diagrams, please feel free to reach out to me and I will answer any questions you have. Also, as we go through the progression, please pause the video so you can see where we are at in the diagram. Okay, so let's talk about what is happening in your mind during your battles with error and distrust. Now, as you can see by the diagram below, error and distrust are adjacent to your thought processes. And as you have learned, this is a major issue, for your thought processes are the primary drivers of your thoughts. Ergo, by placing error and distrust adjacent to your thought processes, the stage is set for you to believe in a lie, which is why you will have no trust in the truth. For the presence of distrust is evidence that you are questioning the truth, which leads to a withdrawal from the truth and a migration towards the error, which is in effect a lie. You can see this by observing the table below, which reveals how one progresses from the phase of the questioning to the phase of withdrawal. Now, we can further prove this matter by analyzing the path that error and distrust follow to conquer your mind. In this order, error and distrust feed into your thought processes, and your thought processes feed into your CPU, i.e., Central Processing Unit. Now, your CPU is a very important mental faculty because it is the engine of your mind and the primary unifier of spirit and physics. In this order, it processes the data it receives from your physical and spiritual thought processes to generate informed thoughts. However, despite the amazing processing power of your CPU, it is agnostic to the input it receives from your thought processes. Here lies the first of many problems that will befall you if error and distrust gain control over your thought processes. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. As your CPU is agnostic to input, it cannot evaluate the input for accuracy, and thus it cannot determine the quality of the data it receives. Therefore, if your CPU receives garbage as input, it will generate garbage as output. As the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. Now, here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, your CPU is the most powerful feature of your mind, and yet it is very much like your will. To wit, your CPU has no power to resist whoever is in control of it, and thus the following is true. Seeing as your CPU is agnostic to the input it receives, it can be weaponized to do great good, or it can be weaponized to do great evil. Here lies the problem. To wit, your thought processes control your CPU, and they are being controlled by error and distrust, two villains who have their hearts set on doing great evil. And trust me, the evil has just begun. Along these lines, the weaponization of your CPU this time around will be much different because error is now involved. No doubt, there are many issues he will create. And yet, the most damaging is sure. And I will offer it as a revelation. In times past, distrust worked to fill your CPU with bad data at a conceptual level, which primarily served to hide the truth. Notwithstanding, error is on a higher spiritual plane than distrust, and being centered in the progression of ignorance and deception, the spirit of error is equipped to take the concept of bad data to the next level. To wit, error does not limit himself to the deployment of bad data to hide the truth. On the contrary, the spirit of error structures the bad data to provide a logical alternative to the truth. And you will believe it, for distrust has already created an environment within your mind where you have no trust in the truth. He is after your impressions. Now, that's the bad news. And the reality is, it only gets worse from here. Remember, we have passed the point of no return, and your CPU has become a weapon of mental destruction. And so it can only get worse from here. Along these lines, your CPU will push the error into the next phase of the thought generation process. Enter your impressions. Now, this is crucial because your impressions, if you recall, possess a scale of assessment which grades the output of your CPU. Ergo, even if your CPU has been corrupted with error, your impressions are designed to expose the error, for it has the power to vet the data. This is just one of the many checks and balances Yahuwah has established within our minds to guard us from lawlessness. Notwithstanding, that is how things work in a healthy thought dimension. And yet, that is not the mental environment we are considering. That said, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: what happened to the scale of assessment that is found within your impressions? The answer is sure, and it is as devastating as it is sure. Vis-a-vis, the spirit of error has the power to manipulate your scale of assessment. In effect, your scale of assessment will now be aligned with the error it received from your CPU. My dear friends, I truly hope you are seeing this. Let me tell you something. We are considering next level spiritual warfare. And the reason why the majority in our nation are dying is because they can't see it. As I say, men and women don't wake up each morning looking to fall into error so that they can believe in a lie. And yet, the masses have been infected with many errors, and they are believing in many lies, and hardly anyone knows why. And what is worse, the so-called leaders in this nation aren't even addressing it. Quite the contrary, they are ignoring the greatest threats to their flocks because they are fools who don't realize that the nation is dying on their watch. My dear friends, listen to me. Yahuwah didn't give me this knowledge to lecture you on the intricate nature of your thought dimension. Quite the contrary. He gave me this knowledge so you can guard your mind from the endless assaults of the enemy. Remember, your mind is the primary battle of all spiritual warfare. And there is a reason why deception, as the most pervasive degree of lawlessness, chooses this specific interval to attack. My dear friends, remember what I taught you. If you pay attention, The enemy will eventually show you his crooked hand, and you will see that more than anything, he is after your impressions. And this is a key matter you must understand. Now, per the diagram below, your impressions are in one of the most secure locations within your thought dimension. The reason why is sure, vis-a-vis your scale of assessment is your last line of defense against false doctrine. Here again, the enemy knows this, and so he deploys the spirit of error to do something no other degree of lawlessness can do. To wit, he corrupts your scale of assessment, and by forcing you to work with bad impressions, you will never know what is true. When your experiences are not real. Now, seeing as you have lost your thought processes, your CPU, and your impressions, it's just a matter of time. My dear friends, you have lost all the major battles in this war, and you are on the verge of losing your mind. Along these lines, your bad impressions will further corrupt your feelings, for your feelings are already being corrupted by your emotions. If you recall, this was a result of the dastardly efforts of disregard and despair. Together, they created a hyper emotional environment within your mind that severely handicapped the power of experience. And if that wasn't bad enough, error and distrust further handicapped your experiences by distorting your reality. This is, no doubt, a major step towards delusion, i.e., the final phase of the progression of death. To wit, the distortion of your experiences sets the stage for you to become wholly delusional and trapped inside a false reality. Now, as I say, the adoption of a false reality is the final phase in the progression of error and distrust. Ergo, we should analyze the path they follow to push you to this point by seeing how they further corrupt your mind. Along these lines, your feelings are influenced by bad impressions, hyper emotions, and experiences that are not real. This will, no doubt, cause you to have ill conceived feelings, which can only generate ill conceived thoughts. Ergo, your first thought will be a perilous thought, i.e., a thought that is not aligned with the truth and contrary to the will of Elohim. Notwithstanding, there is a sanity checkpoint that follows your first thought. Enter your voice of reason. If you recall, your voice of reason is designed to guard the thought generation process by vetting your first thought. It does this by applying intelligence to ensure that the conclusions supporting the thought are aligned with truth and facts. Now, in the first war with your mind, distrust worked to silence your voice of reason. But now error has gotten involved. Along these lines, error takes the similar approach in dealing with your voice of reason as he did with your impressions. To wit, error manipulates your voice of reason the same way he manipulates your scale of assessment. In doing so, the truth becomes unreasonable, for as you are infected with a lying spirit, the lie becomes your voice of reason. Ergo, your mind will not generate a second thought because your thought generation process has been rigged from the start. And the two primary sanity checks within your mind have been manipulated, which is why you will believe the lie. Now, that speaks to the first layer of the deception, which is the manipulation of your thoughts. The next layer is even worse. 4. Error and distrust will begin to lay the groundwork for you to become delusional and spiritually insane. This transpires over time as your erroneous thoughts begin to transform your physical and spiritual perspective. Now, your physical perspective is already under the influence of disregard and despair. Ergo, the greater damage here is being done to your spiritual perspective. That is an absorption of the full brunt of ignorance and deception, which feeds into your reality, which feeds into your experiences. And we have now come full circle vis-a-vis. In the beginning, disregard, work to ignore the power of your experiences. And now, error is weaponizing your experiences to do your mind great harm. Here is how. By causing you to view your experiences from a false perspective and with a distorted reality, error causes you to have inaccurate experiences. To wit, your experiences will not reflect reality. The events may have happened, but your recollection and appreciation of these events are not real. Here lies the problem. Vis-a-vis, your feelings are currently being influenced by hyper emotions and false impressions. And to make matters worse, your feelings are now being influenced by experiences you had, but are not real. For your reality is in error. This is key because your reality is the heart of your spiritual mind, which is why error is so desperate to corrupt it. It is for the following reason. If your reality is compromised, your entire thought dimension will be compromised. Now, it is true that the majority of your thought dimension is already corrupted, but the progression of death is not finished. And yet, because your reality is corrupted, your thought dimension is now beyond recovery. And it doesn't matter what you think or how you feel. For this is what happens when you fall into a false reality and your experiences are no longer real. Now, here is the final word. The Ruach did all he could, but their minds were evil and they resisted the good. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, many of you who are following this ministry will hear this message and you will be inspired to prepare yourself for this fight. However, the majority in this nation will hear this message and scoff. And it's not just because their minds are off. Quite the contrary. For the pathway into error was their first choice, for they refused to obey his voice. Heretofore, I recommend stay true to your principles, trust Yahuwah, and obey. For the man who walks in obedience and faith has what it takes to go all the way. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 536, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 6. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 537, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 7. I will post this podcast on November 19th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.